to another episode of The Lockdown featuring our guest, Devin Heroux, a CBC reporter and a curling expert. Devin, how's it going?
I mean, I'm hanging in there. We were talking a second ago that a year ago, the Raptors were in the middle of a run and I got to travel with the team. So I'm not used to being caged in a little box in my condo downtown Toronto, but learning a lot and just trying to do the best I can, I think, like everybody else.
Absolutely. And like you just mentioned, obviously you traveled with the team last year and now you're stuck in your home. What has it been like? You know, March 13th was kind of the doomsday where everything just went, fell apart. And how's that transition been to working at home?
It's been horrible. I mean, listen, one of the things about what I love about what I'm able to do and what I think my strength is really is take people on a journey. And I think I learned this a long time ago, early in my career, is that if you are out in the field, you've got to make people feel what you're feeling and see what you're seeing and take them along for a ride. And so, 8 or 9 months out of the year when I work with CBC Sports, I'm on the road, in planes, in arenas, in stadiums. I was preparing for the Tokyo Olympics. I would have been there for 2 months covering the Olympics and the Paralympics. I was in peak form, right?
Yeah.
And so for it to be all shut down, I think back to those early March days. I had just covered the Briar in Kingston. They handed out the tankard on March 8th. I came back to Toronto for a day. I was on a flight the next day to Saskatoon to cover the Junos and the Juno Cup, the charity hockey game. And then the world just shut down, like you said. So it literally went from ramping up to a complete stop. And here we are.
Devin, curling kind of continued throughout that moment for a bit, I remember. And no one really expected that sports was just going to stop like this. And for storytellers, it's been difficult maybe to find stories. How have you been kind of finding stories in the midst of all this?
It's such a good question. Yeah, curling did continue a little bit, somewhat controversially, but we streamed the youth sports championships. Yep. No fans. It was bizarre. I think our numbers were better than they had ever been because it was the only thing going on. So you can always count on curling. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. And it's been hard for me. I'm an anxious person at the best of times, but I think as journalists, we're always wired to wake up any given day and go, okay, what are the original stories I want to tell today? What are the 2 or 3 stories I have in my back pocket? And my advice for young journalists is you should always have anywhere from 3 to 5 stories, original stories you're working on that you could roll out at any given time, because you never know when a quarantine might hit and you're going to have to lean on some of those things. Listen, I don't really have a life. I'm consumed by my work and I love it. I've made my work my life. And so I'm reading everything I can. I'm on Twitter. I'm seeing what people are saying, engaging with people all the time. It has to be two-way communication with your audience because they're willing to give you stories and tips. And I think journalists have forgotten that. We try sometimes to pretend like we're the keepers of the knowledge and forget that people can actually help us build stories and get stories. But yeah, it certainly has made our job so much more difficult when you're not out there, because I love being in arenas and stadiums and having conversations in the back bowels of an arena, running into a CEO or a coach or something, relationship building, having conversations. You're always going to find a story. So I've been calling everybody I know. Broke a curling story just today about what Curling Canada is trying to do, looking at hub cities to keep the teams competitive, all these things, because you just pick up the phone and call and you never know what people will be willing to share with you.
I saw that when you went to Pyeongchang, you were a digital producer, but you go as a reporter. So clearly you play more than one role. How crucial is it to be so flexible in this industry?
I mean, I've always referred to myself as a fourth line grinder. I never got here. Here on skill, listen, it's been a wild and winding journey for me. I've been with CBC since I was 16 years old. I was brought on the air as a diehard Rough Rider fan when I was 16 back in Saskatchewan. My first CBC radio interview, they just kept bringing me back. And then they said, one day do the news. It was a disaster. I had no idea what I was doing. And I've been doing it ever since. But I think it's because I've been curious. I've been authentic in what I know and what I don't know. I think the audience can pick up on that. I like to ask a lot of questions. I like to be real about the way I present who I am. I think that the audience loves that. But I've been versatile in being everything from an associate producer for morning radio shows to a producer for TV shows to being a reporter to being a digital reporter. I now go out on the field all by myself. I do News Network hits with Heather Hiscox from my iPhone. I'm filing stories. I'm tweeting. I'm taking people on the journey. I'm a one-man band when I go on the road. And I've made myself sort of, invaluable in a lot of ways and indispensable because if they're choosing, if newsrooms that are cutting back all the time are choosing between somebody who needs a camera and a producer and that, you're not going to get sent. But if they can send me and I can do all these things on CBC Radio, I file CBC Radio reports from my iPhone. I do News Network hits from my iPhone. I write stories with my laptop. In Pyeongchang, I was on the buses filing gold medal pieces on my laptop with my laptop literally on my lap coming down the mountain in the middle of the night. So yeah, make yourself indispensable and just don't give them a reason to say no to you. That's what I've done for more than half of my life now.
Devin, I wanted to ask about the Olympic Games. So a few weeks ago, we had another producer from CBC come on the show, Karen Sebesta, and she was talking about like how even though the Olympics has been put on hold for a bit, there's still tons of work that's being done in terms of preparation. So from your side, what kind of preparations have been made in terms of the upcoming Olympics and the other Olympic Games that are to follow?
It's a good question, and it almost makes me laugh because Canadians watch our CBC production, and I think we do it the best. I think when I think of the Olympics, I think of the big montages that we have and the hometown hero features and, just things like that. And everybody sort of goes, oh, wow, yeah, that just happened. It happened months ago, So as everybody's sort of getting ready and gearing up like a couple of weeks before the games, we're 2 years out. We're already planning for Beijing 2022. And I mean, eat your heart out, Olympic lovers. We're going to have Tokyo and Beijing seven months apart. It's going to be great for fans. It's going to be a nightmare for me. I'm going to be running in circles and drinking more coffee than I ever have. But yeah, I am staying on top of every obscure sport you could ever imagine, from doing a half marathon last fall with Olympic race walker Evan Dunphy and doing the whole thing with him. And the whole time he was walking, I was jogging and dying, and he was just strolling. It was embarrassing. But I mean, I got so much information from that. I was going to be flying around the country talking to all these athletes. I mean, the planning was in full swing. And let me just say, Karen Sebesta and I got to work hand in hand throughout the entire Youth Olympics. I was in Switzerland all of January, the only CBC reporter they sent. And I drove around Switzerland for 17 days covering the Youth Olympics. And Karen was back in Toronto putting a show together every day. It was a time of my life, but we worked closely together. So there's so much, literally, you guys, what we'll do is I will sit down with our producers about a year out. We'll look over the calendar, and we will literally, to the amount of detail, go right through every schedule, hour by hour, day by day, and figure out exactly where I need to be every minute a year out from it. And so we basically are sort of projecting what gold medal moment Canada might have, because that's my role for us. I will cover every potential gold medal moment, and it's a ton of pressure, let me tell you. But if you aren't planned, I've seen reporters melt down. If you wake up in the midst of the Olympics and have no idea where you're going that day, you're doomed. It's a disaster. So planning is imperative.
You're very sharp, you're very responsible, and you covered a lot of big moments. What is your favorite place that you've traveled to?
I mean, listen, like, this job has taken me so many places that I could have never imagined. I mean, I've been so blessed to see every nook and cranny of this country. Literally, you guys, every small town curling rink, small town sporting event you can imagine, I've been there. I've been all over the United States, getting to travel with the Raptors and being in the locker room that beautiful night in Oakland when they won, and being beside Kawhi Leonard and being sprayed with the champagne bottle that he was spraying his mom and his teammates. I mean, so remarkable. They flew me to Norway last spring to cover the World's Mixed Doubles Curling Championships. I was in Sweden. Sweden, pardon me. My mind's on Sweden. I wish I was in Sweden. I was in South Korea, of course. I was in Switzerland all of January. The Olympics. I mean, I've dreamed of covering the Olympics. And then you walk there and you see the rings and you're there and you see the magic that exists within the Olympics. It's abundantly clear to me that all I want to do for the rest of my life is just travel around the world and watch sports and tell people about what I just saw. So it's a pretty cool gig. It's not lost on me every single day how cool it is. I don't take it for granted at all. And you know, when they send me on the road, you guys, I mean, I've been at this for a while now. I still wake up every single day with the fear of God in me of what am I going to produce today? How great can I be today? What story can I tell today? Every single day, because I know getting sent on the road and being in the venue is something that is happening less and less and less. And so when I get to be the one there, to be in Las Vegas for the first ever NHL playoff game, and on and on and on, you know, it's such a blessing, really, that I'm grateful for.
A couple of days ago, you tweeted about the possibility of there being an Olympics without fans. So can you kind of just elaborate on what your thoughts are on that, what it would kind of look like, and do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's better to kind of push things and wait until fans can be present?
I don't think there can be an Olympics without fans. And just reading what IOC President Thomas Bach has said about that, he says it's something we don't want. You know, when you start, just big picture, and I can be a little philosophical sometimes, so stay with me for a second. But I think what this quarantine has done for all of us is it's given us a pause that we've never had to reevaluate what pro sport and Olympic sport means to just the everyday person. It's a sweet escape, let's be honest, for most people who put on their jersey, right? And exactly. And head down to the bar or gather in their house with a bunch of fans, and for 3 hours on any given night from April until June, we get to escape. We get to be in that unscripted, joyful bubble that is playoff hockey, playoff basketball. That's as good as it gets. And what's abundantly clear to me is I love all sport. I mean, whether it's curling, whether it's the CFL, whether it's the NBA championship, I've realized lately that I could care less what's sports taking place in front of me. It's more the collective experience, the joy and sorrow and every emotion in between that exists within thousands of people all watching one thing at the same time. When you take that away from pro sport, when you take that away from glory and gold medal moments at the Olympics, what do you have? What do you have? And so I think we're all sort of reevaluating how much pro athletes make, how much we want to spend on showing up at events. It's probably way overpriced. Maybe it'll balance itself out and correct itself out. But an Olympics without fans, those brilliant opening ceremony shots with the thousands of people, the humanity, the spirit of the Olympics, I just don't see it happening, and I don't want it to happen. I don't want to be covering a games where I'm one of 50 reporters in a venue when you can hear people yelling across the venue. Can you imagine a 100-meter sprint final in a massive stadium without anybody, and the roar is Usain Bolt and Andre DeGrasse sprint to the finish line? No, nobody wants that. We want the joy that exists through communal experience. That's what I'm missing.
And It's so true. And your role is affected in that because, like you said, like so much of your storytelling is, having meeting people and like talking with people in passing, right? Can you just speak to how, maybe detrimental that may be in your role specifically?
I mean, I talk to the most random people every day of my life. I've never been afraid to go up to fans. You see beautiful moments in the stands and you get a story out of it. I can remember Ted Young-Bloemen's Dutch wife in Pyeongchang in the stands with their family, cheering him on to Olympic gold. I mean, it takes away everything. It takes away, listen, another thing that's become crystal clear for me over the last 3 or 4 years out of my career is that when you're telling stories, you want to make people feel something. So when I'm in these venues and I'm feeling the rush, the surge, the electricity of a building, I want to portray that to people reading my stories. I want them to feel what I feel when I'm enveloped by all of that energy. You take that away and you take out a massive part of sport. I know we're all starved to watch something on TV, but at the expense of not having fans and losing the magic and the stories that exist within all of that. Home field advantage. I wrote and reported a lot this week about the Grey Cup potentially taking place. The home field advantage if you have the best record in the CFL. There is no home field advantage because nobody will be in the stadium. I mean, part of football, there's research that shows if you have a rabid fan base making noise when the other team's on offense, we're talking about delay, game penalties, offsides. Fans affect the outcome of sport. It affects performance of sport. And it's a huge blow to sport if we don't have those fans.
Obviously the fans play a huge role in your motivation and your inspiration to tell stories. But what led you to becoming the storyteller you are today?
Oof. I have no idea. I always joke, I don't know if I ever even wanted to do this, but the CBC keeps putting me on the air and I'll just keep talking. I think at a really young age, I mean, I grew up playing hockey, curling, tennis, golf, track and field. I mean, every sport I could play, I played growing up in Saskatoon. So sport has always been integral to my life. In fact, every one of us in my family growing up, my dad, my mom, my brother, my sister, and I, we were all in ice sports at the same time. So family dinner was off the table, literally and figuratively. So I fell in love with sport, but to me, like I said, it gets back to the whole experiencing something in a collective way. And I also love telling people things. I love knowing things that other people don't know and then saying, hey, I have something that you might find interesting and let me tell you it in what I believe to be a compelling way. And I think that's why I love doing what I do, because I try not to put on too many airs about tonight on the news. And we're all sometimes just trying to be somebody that we're not, especially in the journalism world. There was a time in my life where I didn't really like who I was as a person. And early in my career, as you're sort of awkward and figuring out what you sound like, nobody likes the sound of their own voice. I know it. You're trying to change it like a disc jockey or a AM radio news reporter, and then you're doing these gestures with your body, and you're just not who you are, and the audience can pick up on that. And so, for me, it's been a fascinating journey to see how my acceptance of who I am in my life has translated to being more comfortable in front of the microphone. And I think that's probably still why I'm doing this, because it's exhausting. When you're on television on a national network, it's horrifying. I did hard news for 10 years, being thrown out to the wolves every single night in Calgary, not knowing what I was going to show up to. That is so stressful. But I think now in my career, I'm enjoying it more than I ever have, because I don't really care what people think about me or how I sound. I'm just going to tell you how I feel and the story. And I think it's gotten easier, and I think people enjoy it more, and I enjoy it more. So it's been cool. I think that's the only reason why I still want to do it, or else I would have been out a long time ago.
No, I definitely agree with you. I think even back to, like, for us as sport media students, when we've had opportunities in class to be on air and the cameras are on you and everyone's looking at you. It's a weird feeling because you do get nervous, you get those nerves, but it also gives you that adrenaline rush, and it's a feeling you can't really explain.
Oh no, like, man, if you saw me even to this day, like, and even the best, we're hot messes before we go on the air. Like, I have this whole pregame routine. I do exercises with some of our on-air coaches who are the best, by the way. I've worked with Ron McLean and everybody in between. And you got to own it. So I love what you're saying. When I have an audience, I'm the best. It's one thing to talk in front of the camera. And I always think that like I'm talking to a big crowd when I'm looking down the barrel of the camera. But when I'm out at a live event and people are gathered around like that, I'm in my sweet spot. Like, that's when I just I'm nervous inside. But when the bright lights come on and that red light on the camera comes on, it's like showtime, baby. And that's what I would say to all of the young journalists is we get so awkward and we think that everybody's watching us. But and they are, and they're probably waiting for you to screw up. But you just got to sink into that and love it, and it will serve you so well. And suddenly you being afraid of that and them sort of giving you that energy changes, and they're just like fixated on what you're saying because you are so in the zone. And I've had a lot of those times in my career where I felt that, and it is a sweet feeling. But you got to own it. You got to sink into it because it can psych you out big time.
How does storytelling differ from, say, an NBA Finals where fans know who the players are, they know their backgrounds, compared to an Olympics where you don't really know who the person is until they step on the podium?
That's an outstanding question. It really is, because it actually shapes the way you cover events completely. So you're right. For the Olympics, as the official Olympic broadcaster in the country, we have to identify who we think the potential stars are going to be and make them household names, because you're right. Outside of every 2 years, Canadians don't really hear about these people. So I am working relentlessly on that to try and get these people in front of the spotlight as much as possible. But you're right. I mean, if you're going to spend 100 words telling the backstory of a person, you better make it good and you better make it count. But then you're right. When you get to the NBA Finals, you don't have to give that context. It's already built in context. So, when you're thinking about the arc and the narrative and what's the most important part of the story, you really have to think about how much you have to tell the audience about it. I mean, during the NBA Finals, we knew a lot about these players. I don't know how much we knew about some of the tragedies that had existed in Pascal Siakam's life, in Kawhi Leonard's life, in Freddie Van Vliet's life. I mean, this was a cast of characters who have had so many setbacks in their life. So it's one thing to think that everybody knows them, but that's where I would challenge you to push back what the herd mentality of journalists are doing. And that's where you're going to get the gems. I was at the Olympics. When you're at the Olympics, if you haven't done your research, you're done. Because all you're going to get in a 2-minute mixed zone interview with that person is quick little clips. You're not going to get into who they are, who they were as a child, all these things. So everybody's covering the curling and the big collapse of Canada in Pyeongchang. I had flown to Yellowknife in the middle of nowhere. I was on a dog sled with Kevin Cooey's family. And his father opened up to me one frigid December night in the middle of the curling club in Yellowknife about surviving a residential school. He had never spoken publicly about that. And on that night, I get such a compelling story about Kevin Cooey's family, about his Aboriginal roots, about a father that wanted to connect with his children through sport in a way he never did. Break this story in the midst of the Olympics when everybody else is chasing and doing the same story. And it becomes, I think, one of the more compelling stories of the game. So just when you think everybody knows everything about these people, push a little harder. That's what's going to set you apart.
Totally agree with that. Everyone thinks that athletes put everything out there because of social media for one. But, like you said, some people, they got to play the game right, obviously. And that brings me to my final serious question that we have for you. Obviously, you spoke a lot about brand and authenticity and just showing people what the real side of Devin Heroux is. But do you think social media played a part with that? Because, the changing of the voice in the AM radio is very, 1980, 1990 style, and social media took off. So do you think social media has helped you express your own self in that way?
I mean, my social media is a mess. and I think people like it, and I'm authentic in my dialogue. I mean, if you go on my Twitter, I bring people into my home. I mean, I got to turn that way, but you can see my plants behind me. I think my plants are more popular than I am, which is tragic but hilarious, whatever. Because what I realized, you guys, is we're all out here trying to be journalists, like I said, try to be keepers of the knowledge, trying to pretend that we know everything. And I think that just falls on deaf ears. I don't think that's what the audience wants anymore. They want personality. They want somebody who can deliver tough stories. And I think I show time and time again that I can deliver really tough, thoughtful, impactful stories. I mean, I'm proud to say this, but myself, along with a team of colleagues, are nominated and finalists for the Michener Award, the highest award you can win in this country for public service journalism, based on reporting we did on sexual abuse in amateur sport in this country. I can do that, but at the same time, I can have a lot of fun, and I can invite people in and let them see a side of me that I don't think a lot of journalists are willing to do. And let me be frank with you. I haven't said this publicly to a lot of people, but there are a lot of colleagues in the journalism world that think I'm just a mess of a journalist. They've expressed that to me in no uncertain terms about the way I conduct myself in my business. And I'm just, as a gay man from Saskatoon who's a sports reporter, this has never been easy for me. So haters are always going to hate and come at me, because I'm not stopping. But the reality of it is it scares people who have been in journalism and have done it a certain way for a really long time. And I have a lot of compassion and a lot of patience for people being scared. I do. At the same time, I'm not going to stand idle, and I'm not going to apologize for the voice that I bring to the sport media landscape in this country, because I think what it's done, and I know it's done this, is it's created space for people to step fully into who they are. And for me, if I can do that in the athletes that I'm interviewing, for the colleagues who are around me, for the young journalists who are up and coming, if I can do that, then I've done everything that I could have ever wanted, because that's what we need to do. We need to have authentic communication more than ever. Trust in media is at stake. Authentic storytelling is at stake. And I think if we can sink into that a little more, I think we're going to be better journalists because of it.
The way that you tackle things, it's the way that you want to do it, and it shows your authenticity, it shows your genuinity. Last question before we let you go, Devin. What is the first thing you want to do as soon as you can go back outside, everything's back to normal, no more COVID-19?
Oh, man. What do I want to do? Like, if we could run into Jurassic Park and party like it's an NBA Finals again, or like relive those parties in the street when we were singing and dancing. I mean, I'm supposed to be an objective reporter, and I'm doing radio hits in the middle of the street and tweeting, and then I'm jumping up and down with everybody. I mean, listen, all of it. I want it all. I want us to be back there experiencing those joyful moments. I just want to run and tweet in capital letters and yell and get excited about all these things that I think bring us all a little bit closer together. And I love that this pause, because it's been hard. It's been hard for all of us. But I love that we're reimagining community sport, getting together in a way that we've never done that. And man, when this thing ends and the lights come back on and the stadiums feel and the roars echo across the landscapes again, that's going to be a beautiful day, and I'm going to have a front row seat to document every second of it.
Devin, we want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. we know you're very busy and you have quite the journey ahead of you, a lot of Olympic Games to cover. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, such a pleasure, guys. I'm always around for any questions or any help. Keep up the good work. And, I understand we're always in this all together. So it really is a pleasure to be joining you today.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.